everyone talks about veteran benefits going away, especially in 2025, which has not happened at all. However, until 2 days from right now, the VASP program is going away. Jason is way more well-versed in the VASP than I am. I do have the circular 2625 too. And really quick, I learned this from David Piatek from VA Housing Education, by the way, which you should absolutely go check out if you are looking at finances as a whole, and especially for VA home loans. He's just a solid dude. But David taught me that there's a VA handbook that was published many years ago. I forgot when. It was just a while ago. And that VA handbook doesn't get updated, which blows my mind, right? Imagine if there was 38 CFR that was made in the 70s and it never got updated. There were updates in other books, but not 38 CFR. That's essentially how VA home loan stuff works. There's a VA handbook, and then there's these circulars. And so whenever I was reading this and I saw a circular, I was like, ooh, I know what that is because David Piatek taught me that. I'm going to read what the circular says. But before I do that, I know you can talk VASP way, way, way more articulate than I can.
Articulate's a big word for me, man. If you've ever heard me try to pronounce things, I mean, you would know that. Yeah, I keep it simple, stupid. That's kind of my motto. All right, so VASP, that is the program, for those that don't know, that got implemented because the VA screwed up. So back during the COVID craziness, there was a program. The veterans had the ability to, if they were in a tight spot because they lost their job, whatever it is. And I see comments on this stuff all the time, like, look, if you can't afford your house, you probably shouldn't get to keep it. Well, yes and no. They actually qualified for their house. Everything was fine. Then their employer shut the doors because the government wouldn't let them operate during COVID. So why are you going to keep paying your employees? So now you lost your job. So they allowed what's called a forbearance. So the VA allowed lenders, servicers who you're making your payments to be able to add this, any missed payments to the end of your loan. So you'd get agreed to on a 12-month forbearance. I'm not going to make a payment for 12 months while I go find another job, put some money back in my pocket, all of those things. Those 12 months get added to the end. Well, that was great until there was an expiration date on that ability to do that for these servicers. So the VA pulls the plug on it, and it just blows me away, Clay. The writing is so on the wall. I mean, what's going to happen for anybody who's in the process? And the writing's on the wall, and the VA didn't see it, and they pulled the plug on that program, which eliminated the ability for servicers, mortgage servicers who you make your payment to. It eliminated that ability for them to add those missed payments to the end of the loan. There was no grandfathered in clause or anything. It's you either already did it or you didn't. And that left tens of thousands of veterans really in a very, very bad spot. And there was this time period of it's probably almost 6 months where the VA had nothing to help these people with. So they created VASP. VASP was, I guess, a good idea. I guess I would have just reopened up the ability for servicers to work with lenders to able to have them add those payments back to the end of their loan. Just reopen that up and put some additional language in there. But instead, they created VASP. VASP is essentially it was the last kind of resort or tool in the toolkit for veterans that were facing foreclosure. It allowed the VA to purchase that loan from the servicer and then service it themselves. So now you would make your payment to the VA at a 2.5% interest rate, which is just unbelievable in today's market. And it was the VA's way of trying to, okay, that was kind of the going rate then. So let's just kind of move you back into that. But now the VA is saying, well, this was a stupid idea because we're not a lender. We're not a servicer. We're not supposed to be, we're not going to create a big department of processing payments and, issue. What happens if you're late on that? Well, you got to call somebody. Who are you going to call? The VA. Well, now you got to call the VA and talk with somebody who's a loan person there. And it's just, it's too much for the VA to deal with, I guess. So now they are ending this program, again, pulling the plug, and in my opinion, Clay, without a solid fallback as of yet. There's some ideas floating around, there's some legislation floating around, but there's nothing concrete. So now anybody who's currently in foreclosure, going through that process, this option's getting pulled away, leaving you with who knows. And hopefully the VA will figure this out quickly. I will throw out, just to kind of double tap on the David Piatek thing, who we've had on this channel. We've had him on our personal channels as well. He is a solid resource to bounce ideas off as well. If you are in any sort of a circumstance, have a conversation with him, and he might be able to guide you down a path. He is definitely the mortgage subject matter expert, so utilize him. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, my fear, I'm going to go at a different angle and then I'll read the circular here. My fear from this video when we post it, Jason, is that it's kind of similar to veterans losing their jobs in the federal workforce, not specifically the VA, meaning,
Right.
Oh, it didn't happen to me. It's not my problem. Do better. You know,
right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, I have friends that have lost their job, both on the contract side and federal employment side, and it sucks, dude. So it's easy to type a comment that is, I would say, disgraceful. At least I would make that argument, right? And I think that really applies to this situation in particular. It would be easy to say if you can't make your payments, then it's not your house, which you're not wrong. However, you don't have to be a douchebag either. Like that's the best way to say it. Okay, now I do want to read this statement from the Consumer Finance Monitor. It says VA characterized as a last resort tool, and that's exactly what Jason had brought up, for VA home loan borrowers facing severe financial hardships, and that's the VASP. Now in Circular 26, TAC 25, TAC 2, the Marine Corps says TAC, everyone else says dash. I'm going to keep saying TAC because that's what I do. VA announced that as of May 1st, 2025, it is rescinding VASP as the final option and will stop accepting VASP submissions. At some point, we have to get away from COVID this, COVID that, and I understand that. But I think you said it best, Jason, that, well, for those affected, what's the fallback plan specifically? If one veteran goes down, if you lose your home, you file bankruptcy, that's an entire life decision, right? Like that's going to be a dark cloud over your life until you die. Maybe even the life of your children, depending on where you're at. And so I would like to see some sort of backup plan, what that looks like. The VA's plan is to cut this program, which I think at some point it needs to be cut. I think most people would agree with that. The issue I have, and I think it leads into our next conversation, which we'll get into, a trend I'm seeing with this administration specifically, if there's a lever, if they pull it back and see what broke, if anything breaks, they'll let it go back up. If not, they pull it back a little more, then a little more, then a little more until something breaks. And they're like, okay. Time will settle. Then they keep pulling that lever. And I think VASP is let's do it. Let's see what happens. We'll figure it out later. In a statement made, I want to say by the VA secretary, definitely under this administration, it was about something we're going to this is going to happen. It's going to solve 80% of the problems. 20% will have a negative effect, but we can work those later on. The bang is worth the buck here is essentially what they were saying. And I was like, well, if you're in that 80%, great. If you're in that 20%, not so great. And I think we see that same trend now bleeding into VASP. So before we switch topics, I want to get your final thoughts on VASP or whatever I said sparks any thoughts.
Yeah. again, I think that the one thing that you did say that kind of resonates is we as a veteran community, the veteran sphere, if you will, right? And for those that never heard me say that the veteran sphere includes everybody, surviving spouses, dependents, caregivers, veterans, disabled veterans, it's all of us, right? And I think that we need to stop looking at it. Does this affect me? Does this not affect me? We need to instead look at, is this the right thing or the wrong thing for the veteran sphere? And we need to look at wins, whether they impact us or not, as a good thing, packing the snowball, if you will, right? So the more that we can add to it, the better. And some things just aren't going to impact you or affect you today. Let it come later, right? So that's really all I wanted to add is that we need to look at it from a more what's good for one is good for all kind of aspect, and getting back to that type of a mentality.
No, that's you can transfer your VA home loan. That's one of the benefits we have. So imagine you're gonna die, right? You're a veteran, you know that's gonna happen for whatever reason. You're transferring your home loan to your spouse or whoever it is. So they buy a house. And then COVID happens. The federal government, by the way, shuts that business down. Now they can't make their payments, and all of a sudden they are on the verge of filing bankruptcy. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Is that right? I think arguably, I would say almost objectively, that answer is no. Okay, I think that's a perfect segue into a very